G'day, it's Glenn here from Precision Wealth Management. Just want to do a quick video today around some of the options you could have if you've received a total and permanent disablement claim on a total and permanent disablement insurance policy you have. Now what this is referring to is what happens in a lot of instances is that total and permanent disablement insurance policy is owned by your superannuation fund. So what happens there is the proceeds are initially in your superannuation fund, but because you've met the requirements of a total and permanent disablement claim, you should also then be eligible to access your superannuation as well. So I'll go through, I guess, the options available to you and a couple of pros and cons of each of those options. The first one is you just leave the money in your superannuation accumulation fund. You don't touch it, it continues to be invested and grows in accordance with the earnings of that superannuation fund. The positives of that is that when your superannuation fund is in the accumulation phase, it's not assessed by Centrelink when you're under the age pension age. So if you're potentially getting disability support pension from Centrelink, you don't want to have a huge assessment of assets or income. So leaving the money inside the accumulation phase might be the right thing to do. The downside of that is that obviously you can't use the money. It's inside your superannuation fund. So if you need the money for anything or you want to spend it on something, that's not going to be the right thing. And the other thing is that tax is levied at 15% on the earnings. So when you're invested in superannuation accumulation phase, there's a 15% tax on earnings. That could be okay if the alternative is a higher tax rate, but also not so good if the alternative is a lower tax rate or no tax rate. The next option is to withdraw it out as cash. So the first thing to consider there is to say there will be tax payable on that withdrawal, or there may be tax payable on that withdrawal. Now the amount of tax payable on that withdrawal is based on a formula that uses your eligible service date in your superannuation fund and your current age. So keeping things simple, in general, it means the younger you are, the less tax you'll pay when you're withdrawing it. The older you are, the more tax you're going to pay on withdrawing it. But if you need a lump sum from that, it may be that you just have to pay that tax. The benefit of doing that though is the money's then outside of superannuation fund and you can use it. You might need to use it. You might be needing to buy a house, you might need to make modifications to your house or a raft of things. So the positive is that you've got the money out. Another downside of that though is once the money's out of your superannuation fund and you haven't spent it on something or bought a house with it, it then may be assessed by Centrelink. And so if you're getting disability support pension, that may have a negative impact to your Centrelink benefits. And the other thing is to say, well, if you haven't used it on buying a house or something like that, and the money's outside of superannuation for you to invest for your longer term, there may be tax on those earnings because it's going to be taxed at your marginal tax rate. So depending on how much money it is, the taxable income of the investment, and if you have any other taxable income from other sources, there may be ongoing negative taxation implications by having that money outside of superannuation. The third option is you can transfer your superannuation in the accumulation phase over to a superannuation disability pension. So the money is still within the superannuation environment, but it's now in a pension. The first benefit of that, as opposed to here, is that the tax rate on a pension is 0%. So with that money invested within the pension, the earnings are taxed at 0%. So you'll immediately get a better investment return here than you would if you left it in the accumulation phase, purely for the fact that you're paying 0% tax on earnings as opposed to 15% tax on earnings. The downsides of the pension though is that in a pension it is assessed for Centrelink. So if the Centrelink is a consideration, you need to make sure that you're not having so much money in a pension that it's having a negative impact to your Centrelink And the other thing is, while it's in the pension, you can't spend that money. However, pension payments. Now you have to take a minimum pension payment every year, and you can take anywhere from the minimum pension payment up to the full amount of the pension. So the whole balance essentially. The tax implications on those pension payments are different to the tax implications on withdrawing it as a lump sum. Now it is similar in that formula I spoke about does play a role, but then the taxable component of those pension payments are taxed at your marginal tax rate. So what can happen in the pension scenario is that you take small amounts of pension payments over a long period of time, and if you've got no other taxable income from elsewhere, that can essentially be tax-free. So, and that pension payments may be used for your ongoing living expenses if you don't need a lump sum initially for modifications of a house or a house purchase. What can happen in a lot of instances for people is that the right answer can very well be a combination of all three. It really depends on your circumstances, your financial position outside. You might have a spouse that's continuing to work, in which case you're not going to get disability support pension, so the Centrelink implications go away. You may have income protection, so while you've got a claim on TPD, you might also receive income protection payments, which will be taxable income to you. That's an implication to consider. And just your needs. What are your needs now? You might need a lump sum, or you might more need an ongoing income stream, or a combination of all. So I hope this has helped talk about the different options and some of the pros and cons of each option. But if you'd like to know more, please get in touch and we'd be happy to help.